Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel and lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. This edition of On Texas Football is brought to you by our friends at Advanced Pain Care. We'll hear a special message from Advanced Pain Care here a little bit later in the show. We're going to talk about the Texas defense. Does Will Muschamp have what he needs to get this defense where he wants it to be? And we know when Steve Sarkisian pulled the plug on the Pete Kwiatkowski era at Texas and brought in Will Muschamp, guys, we knew it's a pretty radical change. There wasn't really anything, quote unquote, wrong with the Texas defense. But Sark isn't fine with, okay, he wants an aggressive attacking defense. Rod, we know the style Will Muschamp likes to play. Blake Gideon's return to Texas is now official, so he'll be working things on the back end. Will Muschamp, CJ, as you pointed out, Sark has said time and again, the head coach of the defense, he's going to be in charge of everything over there. So, Rod, I'll start with you asking a simple question. Does he have what he needs to make this defense work in the way he wants it to work?
Well, Blake Gideon's a part of that, right? Him bringing in Blake Gideon, a guy he can trust, someone who has familiarity with, the Texas roster actually even still, because he's not that far removed. Also a guy that has familiarity with Muschamp's system because he's played under that system and also was a young coach under Muschamp at one point too. So if there's he's the bridge, right? That's going to be able to connect the two. If there's anything lost in communication or there's any divide between the coaching and the players, he should whether it be evaluation or that be the way a player needs to be motivated or way a player needs to be utilized, he should be able to help Muschamp with it because Muschamp trusts Blake Gideon. And that's what this is about. This is about trust because ultimately, PK wasn't doing a bad job, but Sark implied that he didn't totally trust him with the defense. That's why he's using that term head coach of the defense. He didn't use that term with PK a lot. And now Sark is changing or at least allowing the head coach of the defense to get guys who were into the portal to come out of the portal, something that he was against as a coach. So I think it's about, I trust Muschamp with the defense. That is his defense. He can do with it what he wants to do. And I think Muschamp trusts Blake Gideon in terms of his knowledge of the game and his intimate knowledge of the Muschamp system. So I think more importantly, he's the bridge, and that's what Muschamp needs. You need somebody to come in if you're going to have this defense and have it embedded, implement it quickly, and have these guys be able to reach their ceiling and maximize their talent quickly in the system. You're going to need the knowledge of Blake Gideon. So I think that's the number one thing from a personnel standpoint. That's a deeper discussion, but I think ultimately, in terms of implementing his scheme and his system, Blake Gideon is pivotal.
CJ, let's look at the defensive front. Obviously, everything's going to revolve around Colin Simmons, but you look at what Texas brings back on the interior with Hero Canoe deciding to come back, Alex January, who I thought just got better and better as the year went on, and then you bring back Ty Anthony Smith at linebacker. You add Rasheem Biles from Pitt out of the transfer portal. Do you like the personnel Will Muschamp has on defense to be able to play that aggressive attacking style system he wants to use?
Yeah, I think so. And of course, Colin Simmons is going to be the guy that you circle and say, okay, everything kind of revolves around him. But what's been really interesting, and we'll see where Texas goes out of the portal if they do add another edge rusher, but they wanted Jaden Woods, right? They wanted Wendell Gregory. They thought about bringing in Caleb Herring as well. They're still looking at an edge. And that's really interesting to me because on the surface, edge feels like one of the more deeper positions, more talented positions in the entire Texas locker room at the moment. Yet they're still looking at it an additional piece. So whether it's Lance Jackson, whether it's Richard Wesley, whether it's Zeno Umeozulu, right? There's a lot of talent there, but how do you maximize it? Well, to me, Will Muschamp's looking at the room saying, hey, one more additional piece, one more option in body in this room is going to make the world for me. So that's really interesting. But above all, I mean, how do you not look at Rasheem Biles and Ty Anthony Smith combined and say, okay, there's a lot of opportunity to take the football away. That's exciting. Add in Tyler Atkinson, right? On the interior, you got a lot of beef, right? We talk about the additions of a Zion Williams or an Ian Drafard, but behind that, it's Josiah Sharma. How do you implement a Hero Canoe with Alex January and a Murad Watson? You got plenty of bodies on the interior. That's the most exciting piece is, hey, he's not working with scraps in year one. He's able to kind of twist the dials how he sees fit while also knowing that the room is stacked in that front seven, no doubt.
Rod, you go back to Will Muschamp's first run at Texas, and there were guys, whether it was edge guys, interior guys, linebackers, he tried to kind of unlock whatever that tool was that was going to allow those guys to rush the passer. Even, Alex Okafor early in his career, Keenan Robinson early in his career. Will Muschamp used Keenan Robinson at that buck linebacker position to rush the passer. He had Alex Okafor playing multiple shades to try to maximize his impact rushing the passer. And when I think about the personnel, CJ just laid out several names, but the two guys that I've kind of got circled, what does he do with Justice Terry? And what does he do with Brad Spence? I think those two guys are X factors in the defensive front in terms of how aggressive you can be, how creative you can be getting after quarterback.
Yeah, I think, and I'll add, because I totally agree with you, Jeff. I think another guy I'll add to that is kind of a Lance Jackson. Just guys I feel like have multiplicity in their skill set. You can move them around the front. And that, kind of what Sark does offensively, you can say Muschamp will do defensively. He's going to hunt matchups, and he's going to manipulate those matchups in different ways, whether it be with the different fronts he's going to play or with the presentation. And I think he's got those kind of athletes. You brought up three of them. I think, obviously he's going to find ways to weaponize Colin Simmons even more. I think that's also something that, and maybe was the reason that Sark wanted to move on from PK. In addition to the coverage issues we talked about and inconsistency in pass defense, I think he wanted somebody. We talked about Arches last year, being all in for Arches last year. I think there's a philosophy like, listen, Colin Simmons is also going to be a top 15 pick. This guy's really special. He's one of the best pass rushers in Texas football history. Let's make sure we give him the best opportunity to succeed or reach his ceiling as a player. I think he's going to be a multiple. It's going to be a multiple defense. And it's going to be aggressive defense. So if you're talking about a multiple defense, you got to have a lot of different pieces so that, but whether it be matchup based or whether that be situational based, you'll be able to put out the best possible front to match up with that offense or to match up with that system. And that's why you got Jafar, you got your big nose. You talked about all the different bodies they got in the interior. I think you're going to see them run, sometimes run that penny front. I think you're going to see them, with basically almost running a 4-3 with and I think what he wants to do is have his nickel be very physical. I think when you talk about what he may be missing, ideally is his physical nickel. He's got nickels he likes, but you go look at his traditionally last couple of years there at South Carolina, last couple of years there, or the couple of years he was a co-DC there at Georgia, nickels were a little bigger, average probably about 5'11", 6 foot, right around 200 pounds. Picture, kind of Jahdae Barron, that's basically kind of what the nickels were, a little bit thicker. Texas didn't have thick nickels. They have kind of coverage first nickels. And so I do wonder if they're going to try to pack some weight on one of them nickels. They obviously Grayson Littleton is the guy, or if they're going to look at potentially, you can look at a Bo Masco who may be a little bit thicker, or maybe put him in there. They don't have the ideal nickel he wants right now. I will say that. And your linebackers are awesome. I love them. They're playmakers, but they could be considered undersized. So I do think he's offsetting that with the girth and the size that he's getting on the defensive line, so that he can have playmaking linebackers that can just roam and don't really have to worry about getting off blocks and confronting blocks as much. No, we'll let the D-line handle that and let you guys just fly around to the football and be quick key, fast flow linebackers. So I think that's part of the thought process there too, but you are undersized a little bit at linebacker, and I don't know if you have the ideal physical nickel. So you're looking at things that, does he have the ideal pieces? Those are two things I don't know if they're ideal yet, but he is a really good innovative defensive coordinator. He'll find ways to scheme around it.
CJ, we've talked about the coverage issues ad nauseum here on the channel, and we know watching the games, the eye test didn't lie. The numbers were what they were. In your opinion, based on bringing Blake Gideon back with the personnel he's got on the back end, do you feel like they've done enough, or where do you think they're at in addressing the coverage issues they had last year?
Well, I like the idea of finding continuity, finding someone that's familiar with Will Muschamp, right? And who better to bring in than the re-addition of Blake Gideon, right? That makes all the sense in the world. Someone that's played for him, coached with him. Someone that's familiar with Texas and Steve Sarkisian and what he wants to do. That makes sense. And, for all the good things Pete Kwiatkowski did at Texas, I think one thing that was more frustrating than anything was the inability to stitch the back end with the front. And that was something that he always seemed, it was a different approach. I'll say it, hey, I want someone to call the defense secondary while I call the front seven. And it's like, well, they got to kind of coincide together. So with Muschamp and Gideon back, I think it's going to be very easy. Is hey, what we play up front is going to match basically what we play in the back end, and I think you're going to see a very similar style of very aggressive football. But additionally, it's what Sark wants to do, and that's kind of in your face press man coverage, play that aggressive style of defense that will ultimately align with that of a Georgia defense, Rod, which we've mentioned several times. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And again, finding someone that's very familiar with Texas, with Steve Sarkisian, and obviously with with Will Muschamp and Blake Gideon, it makes all the sense in the world. So I'm very optimistic about it, and I think it's a great fit here for Texas.
And I'll say this about the aggression, because I totally agree. I think CJ hit the nail on the head. It's about coordinating the coverage with the front, and that's something PK struggled a little bit to do. We talked about that, from his time with Jimmy Lake, and even early on with Terry Joseph doing that. But they want more aggressive coverage tendencies. And I went back and looked at Georgia Tech. So the 1 year where Blake Gideon was actually calling the plays, and to see how aggressive he was compared to PK last season. And all the aggressive indicators are up. So if you look at man coverage rate, higher man coverage rate for Georgia Tech than Texas. If you're looking at blitz rate, Georgia Tech had a higher blitz rate than Texas. They had a higher simulated pressure rate, higher stunt percentage rate than Texas as well. There's a lot of the aggressive indicators. They just were a more aggressive defense. You're going to bring him in. We know Muschamp is. We ain't got to go through his aggressive indicators. That's just who he is as a player and a person, by the way. Player, person, and coach. So you're going to combine that with also whether they're going to be a pass game coordinator, whatever they're going to give him the title of, but someone who is going to coordinate the coverages, who is also really aggressive. And remember, there were times last year where you would have aggressive fronts, and then you would have very passive, soft coverages. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. If you're going to have an aggressive front, you should have an aggressive coverage to go with it. And I think you'll get that. So, but I will say this about PK: all of his aggression indicators were up from year to year, from 24 to 25. Higher man coverage rates, higher blitz rate from year to year, higher stunt percentage. It just wasn't aggressive enough for Sark, in my opinion.
No doubt. We'll see if the aggression ticks up and what kind of product Will Muschamp puts on the field in 2026. Before we wrap this up, let's hear a word with the help of a couple of lifetime Longhorns from our friends over at Advanced Pain Care.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. And Advanced Pain Care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and Advanced Pain Care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced Pain Care. The pain stops here.
All right, CJ, Rod, thank you guys for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it, and thank you to our friends over at Advanced Pain Care for sponsoring this edition of On Texas Football. For CJ, for Rod, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and until next time.
Good morning.